Accessibility ain't just for those with disabilities. Makes the world better for everyone, online as well as in person. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the blind blogger, and this is another episode of the Accessibility Advantage, which you can find at theaccessibilityadvantage.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn under Maxwell Ivy, which is IV as in Victor EY. I do hope you will reach out to me if you want help improving accessibility on your platform, or if you want to come on the podcast and talk about your own accessibility journey. And again, that's theaccessibilityadvantage.com. And before I forget, I need to do my audio description. I am a older Caucasian male, 59 years old. I'm kind of a large man. I have medium length, growing longer brown hair with gray and white in it. I'm wearing a burgundy button-down shirt, recording this from my kitchen chair in my bedroom/office. I have retinitis pigmentosa with Bardet-Biedl syndrome. I have almost no functional vision. My pronouns are he and him. And so I'm looking forward to another great podcast today. My guest today is Christina Oyola, and she is a disabled veteran who draws on her experiences or has drawn on them to create a foundation called That Day. It's a nonprofit dedicated to creating trauma-informed, heart-centered spaces for healing for women, veterans, and others who are navigating the changes in life going from the military to civilian life. And through her foundation That Day, she not only provides resources and safe spaces, but she promotes other voices like her own. Her journey is a continuing one of courage, compassion, and determination to make every minute count. I'm going to include a link to her Linktree account because her website is still under reconstruction, and I want to make sure y'all do have a way of connecting with her. I will put that in the description. I'm sure that we will definitely get y'all together should you want to participate, take advantage of her services, or contribute to her nonprofit. So, Christina, thank you for coming on the podcast and welcome to the Accessibility Advantage.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. It's an honor.
Well, thank you so much. I'm having to get used to people saying that about my podcast. So, I guess, like you say, we're all learning and growing every day, whether we want to or not, or plan on it or not. So, I think it would be helpful for people to learn a little bit of what your life was like in the military before you began this journey, and then help them understand the process before you finally got to where you are now and you understand you live with disability.
Yeah, so I taped two pieces of paper to the screen. I have my questions that you emailed me so that I can follow along. And then I have a little bit of a timeline date-wise so that I can be able to be fully present for this podcast, as one of my disabilities is cognitive struggles. So I joined the military back in July 2007. I was working my way to finding a safe way to provide for my family while getting out of a relationship that was toxic both ways. So I joined the military in hopes to going active duty and having stability, being able to land on my feet, and then become a mom for both of my kids. There was just one catch. I just had to go through training and make it 6 months without getting injured. And I thought that that was easy. I signed up. I left in August. Within 3 weeks of my venture in the military, I was still in basic training. We went for our first obstacle course. And I was an athlete in high school all my whole life. So I was always competitive. So I took off and climbed the cargo net that went up, and then I went over and my boot got stuck at the top. Next thing I know, I just remember looking at my drill sergeant and him asking me if I was okay, saying I guess, or I don't know, yes, something. And then I went through a tunnel. And then I was one of the top 10 people that finished that obstacle. So when I got injured, nobody asked me what happened or, double checked or circled back. And then I went on. So basic training is 9 weeks long, plus year beforehand where you get off the bus, get all your equipment, and then get to where your training is going to take place. So during that time, I had a lot of things that didn't make sense about my spatial awareness, but I kept going on. I wound up with 102 fever a couple of days. Between that and another training, they almost had me go back because if I couldn't get better and get my fever down within a certain amount of time, then I would have to recycle. So I had to fight through that. Then we had another training came up. And at this point, I knew that my body was broken in some capacity, but I didn't know in what capacity. I knew my hip hurt. I knew that my lower extremities were giving me struggles. At this time, my head, I was in basic training. Everything was traumatic. Everything was, coming and going. So if did things seem spatially weird? They always did. But I couldn't tell you the difference between being, in training versus being there and being somebody concussed. So anywho, we went to our training out in the woods, and we had to have we were fully loaded because we were training as if we were out on the field or in theater. So I jumped out of a 5-ton, which a 5-ton is not the largest one. It's taller than a pickup. It's probably like a box truck, I would say. You jump out, you jump out of the back of the box truck. You're fully loaded. It's not that big of a jump. I wasn't nervous until I landed, and I was in so much pain, and they made me go to sick call and get my leg examined because I crumbled to the ground. So that's when I finally got seen for a fall that happened now twice technically. So they scanned me from my waist down, and I wound up with stress fractures in my right hip, my right knee, and my right foot.
Yeah.
Right? So I was like, all right, at this point, I already understood what a hold under was. So you could be a hold over or you could be a hold under. So if you're in basic training, you could be hold back. So you could be recycled and then have to get well in that area or hospital, or I was in South Carolina. I would have to stay in South Carolina till I healed and then restart the 9-week training again. So naturally, I don't want to do that. I'm a couple weeks out from the end. So I'm on crutches and I have to do a lot of modifications. And they tell me that because of these injuries, it would be in my best interest to go and get a line of duty, an LOD, meaning I got hurt while on duty in basic training, which sounded so preposterous and so like, I don't want this on my record. But nobody told me how much it would help me. They told me how much it would help me, but they didn't tell me what it was going to set me up for in failure. Is not failure, but in my future. So I fought for the LOD, and they gave me the LOD for my right hip, my right knee, my right foot. Never asked about my head. I didn't disclose. Again, a lot of things happening. So I made it to the next set of training. So I went from South Carolina to Virginia. So I went to my now what's called AIT, Advanced Individual Training, or your job training.
Okay.
So I'm in Virginia, and I'm now on not permanent. It was a dead man's profile. I wasn't allowed to walk in formation. I wasn't allowed to do PT. So I already knew that I possibly was going to be a holdover. Now, a holdover means that you have to stay wherever you are until you're better and then can graduate. So I escaped being a hold under to have a hold over in my future. So I went through that. I'm struggling. I had to sit through class. I had to go through an entire training of 2 months and learn logistics and warehousing and computer systems and databases and all of this stuff while my brain was still confused as to, knowing how that fall from almost, I think it was like 15, 16 feet in basic. So I made it through that, and I wound up being a holdover. I stayed an extra month before I came home, which luckily was the only reason I had housing, because what happened when I got that LOD in basic training, it set me up for life to be able to have my VA disability and be able to have compensation. But what it did on the back end is it made it so I couldn't go active duty. I could never have a full-time job, a house, or stability. So I actually left my second set of training and came home homeless, and was on couches for a few nights.
Wow. So the thing is all of this stuff that's happened, it's happened because of two things. It just, as I'm listening to this, one is you either didn't realize you had injured your head, or you pushed yourself through because you didn't want to postpone the goal due to the head injury. And on the other side, no one in the military really followed up on your injury specifically to ask if the fall during the obstacle course run might have caused head trauma.
Yes, exactly. And to that point, I can't confirm or deny if that when I went and I told them about the first one, I don't remember what I was saying and doing. I just remember hallucinating a lot. I remember seeing people that weren't there when we would go in the woods. There was a lot of things that didn't make sense. And now, even to today, it's odd because I find myself walking and talking sometimes as if I'm in basic training, because at that time my brain was shuffled and I was being trained to walk and talk as if I was in formation or in the military all the time. So sometimes I pivot or I address people in a manner.
Right. So almost like you hear people talk about having been uh, raped or have some sort of violent physical altercation, their brain will shuffle those images around and sometimes even hide them to keep you from seeing them out of self-preservation. It almost sounds something like that.
Yes, and to further that, I did experience a military sexual trauma and had to work through that. And that was very interesting. Only I just want to speak on it for a moment, because when I had to go through my disability claims through the VA, we had to separate that trauma from the physical trauma that I was experiencing in my nervous system in order to get a proper rating, for my disability.
Right. And I don't know about this particular type of trauma, but you did mention some sort of sexual trauma. Texas, our base up in Fort Worth is where a lot of the what changes were made started because of a very terrible situation that occurred up there. So it's something Texans kind of think about, maybe where the rest of the country doesn't when it comes to our military.
Yes, no, Texas definitely was impacted, unfortunately, very hard. And I'm right out of the Philadelphia VA, and when the acronym MST, which is military sexual trauma, came to light, it was very overwhelming and refreshing that it was spilling on posters in the VA. The doctors were talking about it, even in departments that had nothing to do with women's health. They were getting trained to understand that women were experiencing this in all aspects of their lives, and that everybody needs to be informed.
Is it uncommon in the military, especially for a woman, to suffer both physical trauma and sexual trauma?
So I can only speak to myself and the women that I have interacted with, and more times than not, we have experienced both.
Yeah, I asked because as I talk to more people about disability, I'm finding more and more people learn that they have multiple disabilities. So I thought perhaps that especially women could be exposed to both kinds of trauma.
Yeah, no, it definitely, again, like you said, when you have memory loss or your memory plays tricks on you, it's really hard to, integrate what's real, what's not, what you have done, what you haven't.
Right. Now, as part of your journey, I think it's very interesting that you told me this in our pre-interview chat that for the longest time you weren't really certain that you had head trauma until somebody just asked you if in a very simple non-medical format just asked you, have you ever hurt your head?
Yeah, so I came back in February 2008, and from February 2008 up until about 2019, 2020, that's how long it took for somebody to see all the struggles. I was a homeless vet. Like, I was so many things that I was struggling with, and nobody thought to say, maybe there's something going on with her head, until I was in pain therapy. I was with my pain therapist, and we weren't doing anything physical. We were learning about how pain and your brain work. And he stopped when we were talking about visual things. And he was like, has anybody ever asked you if you've hit your head? And I sat back and I was like, no, I mean, I haven't. I mean, there's only one time I could have, but I don't think it would have mattered. And that's when I was, he was like, well, when? I was like, well, this one time in basic training, I fell off a cargo net. And he was like, you don't think that made an impact on your brain? I was like, no, because nobody's taught me, nobody told me, and science wasn't caught up enough for me to understand what was happening to me and what happened to me.
Right. It kind of reminds me, a few years ago I was suffering knee pain and I went to several different orthopedists, had several rounds of MRIs and X-rays, and finally, my primary care doctor left the practice. And they gave me a new doctor, and he asked me, he said, "Mr. Robbie, has anybody ever asked you if it might not, if there's nothing wrong with the knee? So does anybody ever asked you if it could be something wrong with the muscles?" And sure enough, he gets me a prescription for physical therapy, and the knees never bothered me again. So,
Yeah.
sadly, though, it sometimes does take years before the right person asks the right question.
Right. And I was just talking to a young lady the other day, and she was feeling discouraged because she's recently going through, a lot of things, and she's getting a lot of diagnosis or a lot of equipment now that she is considered disabled. And I was explaining to her, I said, somebody, really put it in perspective for me last January. I said, I was at a women's veteran retreat in Texas. And this lady, we were talking about how we both have fibromyalgia, and she talked about how she was one of the first women to actually fight and get the rating through the VA for fibromyalgia. And I cried because I was like, it took me less than several months to get that diagnosis. And then once I applied for my disability and everything went through, it didn't take the 20 years it took you. It took, less time. And my other friend, it took her less time. So it'll take the next one. So sometimes things don't catch up, but it's worth it.
Right. So one thing that I would really love you to talk about is most people have this understanding that when we have brain trauma or a stroke or something that causes damage to the brain, that the brain can be rehabilitated, but most people just don't understand how much work that takes. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, so I am 3 years out. This past January is 3 years out since my most recent setback. I have a ton of things, but I had a complex migraine setback, which gave me fluid on the brain, which made it so that a lot of the things that I had been working with for almost 3 years with my doctors shifted. So I struggled with that. Um, I just forgot what we were talking about.
The effort it takes to
Okay.
recover from injury to the brain.
Yes. So before that, I actually moved out of the house that I'm currently in right now. We have two modular homes next to each other. So my son was 17 at the time, and my boyfriend and I had been together 10 plus years. So they lived in one house, and I moved next door while I went through OT, PT, physical therapy, all the poly trauma therapies that I should have went through 13 years ago plus. And we changed the light bulbs. We got rid of all the furniture. I moved my bed from one room to the kitchen to the living room. I learned the different colors on the wall. I wrote on the walls. We ripped up the floor. When I tell you I changed everything about my life to be able to manage my health and understand it, so that not because I wanted to be so extreme. I had the time, I had the resources, but it was also for my family. They didn't understand what I was going through, and the resentment and the trying to coexist in a space that didn't function for me was really hard. So it allowed us to take the, emotion out of what was going on, and me to actually figure out how I could function, how I can help others, and how to build a business and a nonprofit so that people like me can make money, continue chasing their dreams, and also be able to advocate for themselves and say, I can't do that. I can no longer drive at night. So if you would like to work with me, we'll have to adjust. And that's how I do business.
I see. So I mean, the curious part of me has to ask, why was changing the lighting so important?
So over the years I've developed a lot of different migraines, and with my head trauma, one of the things that really tricks me up is visual. So I have audio and visual processing disorder, so it's really hard for me to process pretty much anything. When the doctor was explaining what was going on after I had my neuropsych eval, she asked me if English was my first language, which I immediately was like, it's my only language. I've struggled trying to learn any other language. And she said, with your education and your community, and being involved in things, she's like, I was really surprised that you scored so low. She's like, it's really hard for you to be in one environment one day and it be the same the next day and your brain be able to function. So she helped me have permission to think outside the box and change everything on my walls if I have to every day.
Okay, all right. So it does sound like, though, that like people with vision loss, consistency is an important part of your world.
Yes. I have eye therapy glasses. So I see a traumatic brain injury eye doctor twice a year, sometimes once a year. And I have to wear these glasses all the time in order to avoid having my migraines outdo me. But it also only lets in green light. And I learned that if I have lights that are my shoulder or down, it helps my eyes not have to process as much.
Hmm. Okay. So, like with a lot of things, learning what works best for you, your body, your environment sounds important as well. But it's kind of daunting to hear about all the things you're continuing to have to work with, given your brain trauma. Could we talk a little bit now about where the idea for the foundation came from, what you're trying to do, and what you're trying to do with that?
Yeah, so my nonprofit's called That Day Community Corner. My son and his girlfriend, my daughter-in-law, we started this because we've all experienced very similar childhood traumas and above. And I wanted to find a space that worked for me and people like me. And what better way to build that than from home? Each one of us has a unique way of thinking about things and looking at the world, and we love to serve and give back. So we created a nonprofit where we help serve the community by helping them create the projects that are needed most in the community.
Right. And I noticed you said something there. You think about the world differently, you approach things differently. And for a lot of people that may sound like it would be a challenge, but I can see how to the right business owner or the right government agency that could be a very valuable ability to look at the world in ways that are different than what would be called quote normal unquote.
Yes. Yesterday I was facilitating a Trauma 101 workshop, and one of the ladies said that she had put a proposal in with a local organization to have people sit at the emergency room for folks that are coming in crisis so that they're not sitting alone. And she said that she's kind of hitting some barriers, but not yet because she just got started. And I said, well, why don't we just get a bunch of volunteers together and go talk to them? I'm a nonprofit. We can sign a contract with them and you can go do that. And she was like, it's that simple. I said, yes. You have a problem. We are certified peer support specialists. We can do that. And I'm a nonprofit, and that's what we're supposed to do. We create safe spaces for the community, and you found a problem and a solution. That's where we come in.
Okay, so talk a little bit more about developing safe spaces.
So, what we're working on with the nonprofit is becoming a sanctuary. So, our entire nonprofit system will be run through a trauma informed protocols and systems so that everybody that interacts with us and we interact with is getting met exactly where they need to be met. And this helps us go out into the community. Right now, we help support local events that might have something go sideways. Last year, we helped a community event. The organizer, she passed away suddenly 3 days beforehand, and 90% of the event was not written down. So the day of the event, we showed up and did the check-in and helped just hold space, listen to anybody, and just be with them as they were all grieving their leader that had just passed.
Okay, and y'all, because of y'all, the event was able to go on.
Yeah, so the community was able to keep going. And then right now, I'm mentoring my friend Jen. She's behind me in a picture. She is autistic, and we are both living in the gray. So we started a live talk show that we do on Instagram currently on Fridays. And we are talking about what it means to live in the gray, her having autism and having to have those accommodations, and me living with a traumatic brain injury and what that looks like, and how they can be similar and overlap.
Okay, I hate to have to admit this, but honesty is a big part of my brand. This is the first time I'm hearing the expression "living in the gray." Who all is included in living in the gray?
So we kind of came up with that together. So living in the gray can mean anything to anybody, but what it means for us is we live in the gray area. So when we go into, if we were to go into a workforce or to an organization, we need real accommodations above what a typical person would think of. For me, I have to have everything printed out, and the lighting and the scents, smells, and what have you all have to kind of be eliminated in order for me to be in one space. Jen, she's autistic and she works at TJ Maxx. She's been working there for 3 years. So her boss and her work to be able to have a schedule and a work environment that affords for her to be able to bring in some kind of independence while she chases her dreams.
Okay, so would living in the gray include most people that identify as having a disability?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I've been living in the gray and not knowing it. That's where I was trying to get to.
Oh, yes.
Okay. All right. That's interesting. We're all, as a community, we're always looking for better ways to talk about things, So living in the gray might be a good, because people get trapped in the disability, disabled, differently abled. Um, I'm not different for some people. So living in the gray, I'll have to remember that and look out for that becoming a brand or a thing for y'all.
Yes, and Jen keeps reminding me because I keep forgetting, so I'm going to put this in here. So the gray is spelled capital GRAY, and it stands for grace, reality, and you. So we live in the gray, and we're doing it gracefully in reality, and we're being ourselves.
Okay, gracefully, reality, and you. Okay,
Yep.
all righty. Well, and you're continuing to find others to support and to help them go after their goals.
Yes, a lot of folks that I interact with have some sort of disability, and or they're realizing that by watching me on social media or interacting with me that they have similar disabilities like me, and they're going to start advocating for themselves because they're struggling at work or they're having a hard time fitting in with the community because people don't understand them. So they're seeing how I am living out loud and how I try not to sugarcoat things so that it gives them motivation.
All right. And your example is probably being taken mostly by people with more severe disabilities, but there are millions of people out there who have challenges that are either don't realize the cause, or they're afraid to bring those challenges out in the open. What would you say to those people and to potential employers?
For those folks that are struggling or don't know, it's okay. There are answers, and if you take the time to understand yourself, you'll be able to live a better life. And if you can't, there are resources out there to help you navigate that.
Right. So the last thing I would like to get to today is, um, and I kind of mentioned it a little earlier, is by embracing people with disabilities, either by hiring them, contracting them, or supporting them in some way, the the world at large will benefit by having us included. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that.
Yes, no, and this is, I guess, the bread and butter of what the nonprofit really is we want to change the handbooks. We want to make, people aware about trauma because understanding disabilities and understanding trauma go hand in hand. So if we can go in and help organizations and corporations be trauma informed, they'll be more open to the idea of having people with different disabilities work for them and make those accommodations more easily accessible, and have people feel comfortable enough to ask for them without feeling less than.
Yeah, I understand that, especially with with neurodevelopmental diseases, with invisible diseases that are not obvious, that quite often the fear is being stigmatized, ostracized, possibly unemployed as a result of sharing the disability.
Yes. So many. I have a lot of friends that, there's a couple women that I was in my 20s with partying, and they are struggling hard physically, mentally, emotionally. And, everything that I do, they know that I'm making choices so that people that have disabilities can take that time to pivot and find a way to make income that works for them and their family without having to sacrifice basic needs like food, electricity, and clothing.
Right. So as we come to the end here, I'd like to ask you to share two things. One, what would you say to employers and organization leaders about people living with disabilities?
I would tell them that you would be surprised how well we think outside the box and how well we can problem solve with limited resources and a lot of life experience.
And then what would you say to people with disabilities?
I would tell them that it is your life. It's the choices that you make that will give you the best life that you want to live. And not every choice is going to be the choice you want to make, but you have to make the less of two evil choices in order to move forward.
And then finally, what would you say to friends, family members, and coworkers of people with disabilities?
I would tell them that I will never stop fighting for all of us, that we all deserve a space in this world. And the more voices that are advocating, the more we can move forward for the future generations.
Well, I appreciate that you're continuing to share your experiences and your story and challenge the way people think about those of us with disabilities. And I look forward to seeing more success from your nonprofit that day. And I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing some of this.
No, thank you so much. I really appreciate you inviting me and being part of, the voice that needs to be louder.
Well, thank you. Yeah, as I often say, we have money and we have the same needs everyone else does, and we can be loud about it. So I do appreciate you coming on. And her organization is called That Day. We will have a link to it. And thanks to the wonders of WordPress, later on when her website is completely reimagined the way she wants it, we'll swap the links out so y'all can be directed there as well. Again, I'm speaking with Christina Oyola, founder of That Day, a nonprofit dedicated to creating heart-centered safe spaces for people with disabilities. And she's also very big on amplifying the voices of others with disabilities. And y'all might want to look out for that Living in the Gray, GRAY, because that 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 tag could actually catch on in our community, which is always looking for new ways to talk about disability. And I do hope y'all will check out her website, visit her social media profiles, consider donating to her nonprofit, or reaching out to her for services, or maybe referring her to somebody you know who is struggling. As for me, I am the blind blogger, Maxwell Ivy. This is the Accessibility Advantage. You can find me at theaccessibilityadvantage.com. If you're ready to talk about improving accessibility across the online presence of your business, nonprofit, or government agency, then please do reach out to me. There will be a link where you can schedule a short conversation. I'm also always looking for more great guests to come on and share their accessibility experiences and help me advocate for more inclusion. I want to let you know I appreciate y'all spending some time with me today. I know you have a lot of demands on your time and you don't have a lot to spare, so thank you so much for that. I also want to mention 3 really cool companies that support me and my work and that I recommend to anybody. Blueberry, which is Blueberry without the E's, provides the hosting for this podcast and others hosted by people with disabilities. Podmatch.com, which is where I find most of my guests, where I'm the accessibility advisor to the platform. And Less Annoying CRM, which is a CRM, which is client relationship management software that people actually want to use. And there'll be links to that in the podcast description as well. Until next time, please do take care of yourselves out there. This is the blind blogger, Max Ivy. Disabled people, we tell our friends and share to our social sites. Don't think about how hard it is. Just focus on those $signs. 'Cause accessibility ain't just for those with disabilities. Makes the world better for everyone, online as well as in person.
Item chooser menu. 1 to 2 items end stream button. End stream button. End the stream. Outro set not end stream button. StreamYard.